There are legendary Pentax primes, old Star Series zooms, and more K-mount lenses than most photographers could ever try. But for the K-3 Mark III, I would ignore most of them and build the system around just 3 lenses. One gives you true macro in a tiny package, another reaches the equivalent of roughly 460 millimeters, and number 1 is the lens that finally gives this DSLR the autofocus and everyday performance its flagship body deserves. You are watching AltBuzz Lenses. Subscribe for honest buying guides about the lenses that make classic and modern camera systems worth owning. At number 3, we have the HD Pentax-DA 35mm f2.8 Macro Limited. Most K3 Mark III buying guides would stop at recommending another fast prime. This one does something different. It behaves like a natural everyday lens right up until the moment it doesn't. Right up until you tilt it toward a coin, a flower, a scratch on an old camera body, and it becomes something else entirely. A true one-to-one macro lens, hiding inside the body of a standard prime. On Pentax, APS-C 35mm sits close to a traditional field of view. Streets, travel, a face across a dinner table. Nothing about the framing announces itself, and that's the point. This is the lens that lets a photographer leave the house with one small piece of glass and not feel like they've committed to a single genre for the day. Longtime Pentax owners will recognize what this lens really is before they recognize what it does. It's a limited metal construction, a built-in hood, a manual focus feel that rewards patience rather than punishing it. Pair it with the K3 Mark III, and the camera stops looking like a serious, substantial DSLR and starts looking like something a photographer carries out of habit, not obligation. That shift matters more than any spec sheet. The one-to-one macro capability is what actually earns this lens its place in the kit, though. It means the same lens that photographs a street scene can, without changing anything but distance, resolve the texture on a leaf or the grain in a piece of wood. No lens swap, no hesitation, just a different way of looking. The compromise is honest, and it should be said plainly. This is not a PLM lens. Autofocus runs through the camera body and has to travel the long focusing range that macro capability demands, and that means it is not the lens for a bird taking off or a child running toward the camera. But that slowness is not a flaw so much as a personality. It asks the photographer to slow down, and in exchange it gives them a kind of precision speed can't offer. That's why it sits at number 3. Its strengths are real, but they are deliberate, specialized, chosen rather than universal. The next lens changes what the camera can see. This one changes what kind of camera it feels like to carry. The limited prime makes the K3 Mark III smaller and more deliberate. Number 2 uses the same APS-C sensor for the opposite reason, to make distant subjects feel considerably closer. At number 2, we have the HD Pentax-DA 55 to 300mm F4.5-6.3 ED PLM weather resistant. Say the words APS-C to a full-frame photographer, and you'll usually get a shrug. Say them to someone chasing birds through branches with a K3 Mark III, and the sensor crop stops being a limitation and starts being the entire point. This lens delivers a field of view equivalent to roughly 84.5 all the way to 460 millimeters, and it does it while retracting down to about 89 millimeters and weighing somewhere around 442 grams. That's not a footnote. That's the difference between owning a wildlife lens and owning a wildlife system you actually take with you. What makes this specific version worth choosing over any of the older 55 to 300 lenses Pentax has released over the years is the PLM focusing motor inside it. Ricoh built this generation of PLM lenses around quieter, faster autofocus and smoother focus pulls for video. And on a body like the K3 Mark III, that difference shows up constantly. Older glass has a way of becoming the bottleneck in an otherwise capable autofocus system, and this lens simply refuses to be that bottleneck. It opens the door to birds in flight, outdoor sport, distant aircraft, a fox at the tree line that won't wait around for slow glass to catch up. The weather-resistant build backs that up further. Nobody is calling this waterproof, but a native Pentax telephoto built for outdoor use pairs naturally with a body that was designed the same way. The honest limitation shows up at the long end, where the maximum aperture reaches f6.3. That's a daylight lens, an outdoor lens, a lens that leans on the camera's in-body stabilization to steady the frame rather than freeze a subject already in motion. And yes, there are bigger Pentax telephotos out there, lenses that reach further into the distance. They're not wrong choices, exactly. They're just wrong for this kit. This is a 3-lens system built for a broad range of photographers, not a dedicated wildlife rig, and a much larger lens would undo the very portability that makes this recommendation work in the first place. That's also why it lands at number 2 rather than number 1. It opens up an entire category of photography the other 2 lenses can't touch. But most people, most days, are not reaching for 460 millimeters. Before you subscribe and keep going, if honest, no-nonsense buying guides like this one are useful to you, that's exactly what this channel is built around, so consider joining Alt Buzz Lenses for more of them. The 55-300 is the lens I would mount when the subject is far away. Number 1 is the lens I would mount when I do not yet know what the day will involve. At number 1, we have the HD Pentax-DA 16-50mm F2.8 ED PLM All-Weather. Every camera system has one lens that quietly becomes the default. The one that's still mounted 3 weeks after you told yourself you'd rotate through everything you own. For the K-3 Mark III, this is that lens. 16 to 50 millimeters on Pentax APS-C lands right around the range a working photographer has leaned on for decades. Wide enough for a room, long enough for a portrait, and it holds a constant f2.8 the entire way through. That consistency means indoor events, low-light interiors, and subject separation all behave the same way at 16 millimeters as they do at 50, and that predictability is worth more than most spec sheets let on. This is not the older Star 16 to 50 that longtime Pentax shooters remember. That lens earned its reputation honestly, but it belongs to a different era of autofocus. This one was rebuilt from the ground up. New optical design, new PLM focusing system, updated weather sealing, better close focusing. Ricoh has stated that the PLM version focuses roughly 2.2 times faster at the wide end and about 1.5 times faster at the telephoto end than the old motor-driven version, under their own testing conditions. Numbers aside, what that means in practice is simple. Pentax took one of its most respected APS-C zooms and rebuilt the one part of it that was starting to feel dated, and left everything else that made it great alone. The K-3 Mark III carries roughly 25.7 effective megapixels, and this lens was designed with exactly that kind of resolving demand in mind, not retrofitted to survive it. It also focuses down to about 0.3 meters, with roughly 0.24 times magnification, which doesn't replace the macro limited from number 3, but it does mean the lens comes off far less often than it otherwise would. All-weather construction rounds it out, protecting one of the most useful practical advantages a Pentax body still has over most of its competitors. The honest trade-off is size. At close to 700 grams, this is not a small lens. And mounted to the K-3 Mark III, it becomes a setup you feel on a long day of walking. Photographers chasing a genuinely compact kit might look instead towards something like the 20 to 40 limited or the 16 to 85, and that's a fair instinct. But this video isn't optimizing for the lightest bag. It's optimizing for the strongest system, and that's a different question with a different answer. The 35mm limited gives the K-3 Mark III its compact Pentax character, and the 55-300 gives it the reach that makes APS-C so useful. But the 16-50 is the lens I would buy first, because it handles the largest part of everyday photography while finally giving Pentax's flagship DSLR a standard zoom with the autofocus, the aperture, and the optical ambition the body has always deserved. If I could only own one lens for this camera, this would be it. The other two are the lenses I would build around it. None of these lenses were chosen to fill a spec sheet. They were chosen to solve three different problems for the same camera. The 16 to 50 already covers 35mm somewhere inside its range, and the script isn't going to pretend that overlap doesn't exist. It's there on purpose. The zoom gives flexibility, aperture, and speed. The prime gives something the zoom never can. True macro and a completely different way the camera feels in the hand. One expands what the K-3 Mark III can do. The other changes what kind of camera it becomes. Together with the reach of the 55 to 300, that's not three unrelated purchases, that's a complete answer to the question of what this camera is still worth. Building a system around, in 2026, with decades of K-mount glass competing for the same three lens slots. If you own a K-3 Mark III, which of these lenses actually spends the most time on your camera? And if you could keep only 3 K-mount lenses for the rest of the year, would you change anything in this lineup? Or would you defend this exact 3? Let me know in the comments. I read every one of them. And if guides like this are the kind of thing that keeps your camera bag honest, the subscribe button is right there, and it genuinely helps this channel keep making them. The K-mount has decades of glass waiting to be mounted again. But a system isn't built from everything available. It's built from the 3 lenses that know exactly why they're there. For more lens guides built around the cameras photographers still enjoy owning and using, subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses. Until the next one, shoot well.